Now, programming from the Illinois Channel, an independent, nonpartisan corporation formed to provide nonpartisan coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. For more information on the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.
Just ahead, we attend a committee hearing discussing a bill introduced by House Speaker Michael Madigan that would mandate sexual harassment training for elected officials, their staff, and lobbyists. We'll hear from House Speaker Madigan, as well as several women involved in Illinois politics who recount their experiences of sexual harassment, including a violent crime victims activist who alleges she was harassed by Democrat State Senator Ira Silverstein. Then in 1 hour and 15 minutes, U.S. Representative Robin Kelly gives a speech at the City Club of Chicago asking, "Is bipartisanship dead in America?" Representative Kelly discusses attempts to improve cooperation with her Republican colleagues and later takes questions on policies she's advocating to support domestic manufacturing and whether Democrats can stop the Republicans' tax reform plan. That's all just ahead, after a brief word from one of our advisory council members.
Hi, I'm Dave Treader, president of the Federation of Independent Illinois Colleges and Universities. For years, Illinois was known around the world for the quality of its colleges and universities, and not just our public universities, but the many private schools that do such a great job educating more students annually than the publics. Schools like Bradley University in Peoria, Millikan University in Decatur, Loyola University in Chicago, and Northwestern University in Evanston. These are just a few examples of the schools that not only educate the next generation, but also serve as economic engines for their communities, with tens of millions of dollars in payroll and the purchasing of millions of dollars in local services. In fact, the combined economic impact of Illinois' private colleges and universities is over $20 billion annually. Collectively, these schools account for $3.5 billion in state tax revenues annually. Illinois' independent colleges and universities are a key pillar of the economy, bring in billions of dollars to the Illinois economy, as well as adding a cultural richness to our communities. That's why it's important that the state programs like the Monetary Award Program, which enables low-income Illinois residents to attend college in our great state, remain funded. And it's also why it's important for all of us to understand the economic impact of our colleges and universities have on the Illinois economy and our communities. This is why I'm also happy to serve on the Illinois Channel Advisory Council on Higher Education. Their statewide, in-depth coverage of the issues that impact our economy, our government, and our cultural resources help to inform us all on the issues that matter. I'm Dave Treader, president of the Federation of Independent Illinois Colleges and Universities, and proud to be a member of the Illinois Channel Advisory Council.
Next, from Springfield, we attend a committee hearing discussing a bill introduced by House Speaker Michael Madigan that would mandate sexual harassment training for elected officials, their staff, and lobbyists. We'll hear from House Speaker Madigan, as well as several women involved in Illinois politics who recount their experiences of sexual harassment, including a violent crime victims activist who alleges she was harassed by Democrat State Senator Ira Silverstein. This runs about 1 hour.
Speaker Madigan is here to present House Floor Amendment number 2 to Senate Bill 402. We're going to ask the Speaker to make his presentation, and then we'll have a panel of witnesses, and then we'll go to questions. So with that, Speaker Madigan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Let me begin by explaining House Amendment number 2 to Senate Bill 402. The amendment establishes new requirements on all units of government, as well as lobbyists, to maintain sexual harassment policies and requires that elected officials, staff, and lobbyists undergo comprehensive sexual harassment training. The bill, with amendments, will do 5 things. Number 1, the State Officials and Employees Ethics Act and the Lobbyist Registration Act are amended to specifically state that all persons have a right to work in an environment free from sexual harassment and that all persons shall refrain from sexual harassment. The bill uses the definition of sexual harassment found in the Illinois Human Rights Act, which is similar to the definition provided by the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Sexual harassment means any unwelcome sexual advances or requests for sexual favors, or any conduct of a sexual nature when, 1, submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term or condition of an individual's employment. 2, submission to or rejection of such conduct by an individual is used as a basis for employment decisions affecting such individual. Or 3, such conduct has the purpose or effect of substantially interfering with an individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. Every constitutional officer, legislator, state employee, and lobbyist is required to attend sexual harassment training, which includes a description of sexual harassment utilizing examples. The intent of mandatory training is to ensure that everyone has a working understanding of what constitutes sexual harassment, how to report allegations, and what resources are available to alleged victims. Every constitutional officer, legislator, lobbyist, and each unit of local government is required to adopt a sexual harassment policy. The policy shall include 1, a prohibition on sexual harassment, 2, how an individual can report allegations, 3, disciplinary actions for violations of the policy, and 4, a statement that any person reporting a violation shall not be retaliated against and that such an individual is eligible for whistleblower protection. Each state inspector general will have authority to review allegations of sexual harassment and submit any founded complaints to the applicable ethics commission for a hearing. Each ethics commission will have the authority to fine an individual up to $5,000 for a violation of the prohibition on sexual harassment. At the request of President Cullerton and several members, I will file an amendment to clarify the authority of the inspectors general, particularly the authority of the Inspector General for the Secretary of State to investigate allegations made by or against those lobbying state government. Every constitutional officer and legislative leader must annually submit to the applicable Ethics Commission a report detailing their plans for training and the names of those who do not participate in the training. These reports will be made public on the Ethics Commission website. As the Speaker of the House, today I make several commitments to our members, staff, lobbyists, and the citizens of Illinois. First, the Office of the Speaker will continue to review and update its internal investigatory methods and processes. We will review the best practices in both public and private sectors and make all necessary changes. My staff will work with members to ensure they have updated policies. 2, my office will work to educate members and staff about sexual harassment and work on publicizing how to report allegations, including confirmed or anonymous allegations. 3rd, I welcome all suggestions or ideas for improving the culture of the Capitol and eliminating and preventing sexual harassment in every workplace. Any suggestions can be sent directly to my counsel, Justin Cox, for review. Finally, I have decided to appoint a task force on sexual discrimination and harassment. This task force will be chaired by our Majority Leader, Barbara Flynn Curry. It will be charged with conducting a comprehensive review of the legal and social consequences of sexual discrimination, and harassment in both the public and private sectors, and making recommendations to the General Assembly. With input from all stakeholders, this group will focus on all aspects of sexual discrimination and harassment, including determining which behaviors should be legally actionable, methods and procedures to increase and improve reporting allegations, providing protections to those who report allegations, including improving anti-retaliation and whistleblower laws, and prevention of sexual discrimination and harassment. I ask this committee to approve House Amendment 2 to Senate Bill 402. Sexual discrimination and harassment thrives in silence. With this bill and the creation of the task force, I am asking every elected official, every lobbyist, every staffer, and every employer and employee to make a commitment to do more to ensure no individual is the target of sexual discrimination or harassment in the Capitol or anywhere else. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And then we're going to go to the panel of witnesses, and then we'll, if yourself or staff are available for questions, we'll do questions at the end.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My name is Caitlin Duncan. I am a political fundraiser who's worked in Illinois politics for nearly a decade. More than a week ago, several friends and I, some of whom are here with me today, decided to speak out on an issue that has impacted each one of us over the course of our career: sexual harassment. We published an open letter to share our experiences with this issue, experiences that are shared with thousands more women who have worked in Illinois politics over the decades. Approximately 300 people have signed this letter to date in a show of solidarity and support of ending the pervasive culture of sexual harassment in Illinois politics. Since that time, we've been absolutely floored by the outpouring of Me Too stories from other women who have also worked in government and on campaigns. We are grateful for every single person who shared their story with us publicly and in private. It is their bravery that has brought us together here today as we discuss ways to ensure that women work in a safe and secure environment free from every form of unwanted advances. Many of the stories shared in our letter, on our Facebook group, and in private are horrifying. Many women are still too scared to come forward, even years after the fact, out of fear of retribution. Their stories are heartbreaking and difficult to hear. One woman described a terrifying encounter when a legislator followed her to a hotel room, pinned her against the wall, and forced himself on her after she said no. A former lobbyist described meeting up with her colleagues and other elected officials when another lobbyist drunkenly walked up to her and asked, "I've always wondered if you spit or swallow." And when a legislator was harassing me on a campaign, I tried to report it to management. I was fired immediately for describing his behavior as inappropriate and asking him to stop. These are extreme examples of the type of environment we've been forced to work in, smile through, and negotiate in simply to do our jobs. And on top of it, many others have watched this abuse happen and said or did nothing. I have to wonder how many of us in this room have daughters, sisters, or mothers in the workplace. Can you imagine someone treating them like this just once? How about multiple times? Would we accept this as the status quo? My hope is no. We have to do better for the next generation of women in this industry because this is not a new topic. Women have been giving each other the talk for years about which legislators and lobbyists to avoid. No longer can anyone be shocked by these stories or say that they didn't know that this was happening. We are encouraged by the swift action our leaders have taken on this issue. Although this bill does not solve the problem, it is a step in the right direction. We look forward to working with you and making sure that women in this industry feel safe, secure, and respected in the workplace. This bill puts elected officials and lobbyists on notice that sexual advances and harassment are no longer an accepted norm and that there will be consequences for their actions. The negative consequences of these assaults are real. It distracts women policymakers, causing them to spend time worrying about how to manage their harassers instead of managing their issues. It diminishes women's power by reducing them to sexual objects and turning them into pawns for political gain. It reduces women's economic opportunities because women will avoid taking work that involve harassers in positions of power and politics. It discourages women from public service, causing them to walk away from careers they otherwise love. And in our business, our success is contingent upon our ability to be at the table with power brokers, not running away from them in the halls of the Capitol. We recognize that we cannot undo generations worth of sexism, power dynamics, norms, and attitudes about sex and women in 1 week or in one letter or in one piece of legislation. These are institutional barriers that have oppressed women in the workplace for longer than most of us have been alive. We can say, however, that before the last week, the silence regarding this issue was deafening. Now we can't stop talking about it. This is only the beginning. There are no best practices in other states for how governments handle sexual harassment within their backyards. Illinois has the opportunity to be at the forefront of change in culture and setting the precedent for the rest of the country. We take this challenge seriously, and we hope our elected leaders do too. Many people have asked us, what's your end game? Our goal is to do everything we can to make sure that the generation of women in our industry never have to participate in a Me Too campaign. How quickly and effectively we achieve that future is up to all of us. Every single person in this room, in this city, or in this state has a mother, a sister, or a daughter who deserves a fulfilling, positive life free from fear and the shame of this antiquated worldview. We look forward to working with you to change behaviors and culture in our political system that makes us less than human. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dina, I don't want to mispronounce your last name. I apologize.
Good morning. My name is Dina Ninfo, and I'm here speaking in support of Amendment 2 to SB 402 on behalf of the Women's Bar Association as its treasurer and one of the co-chairs of our legislative committee. There is a fast-moving nationwide campaign fighting against the existing culture of sexual harassment that runs rapid throughout many industries, and this amendment is an important step to combating that culture within the political arena of Illinois. We as women lawyers are connected to this issue because we experience similar conduct every single day at the hands of our colleagues, judges, and other professionals within the legal community. The first step to combating this culture is education, training, and accountability, which this amendment includes. Currently, the laws in place that exist protect women in the workplace and typically require an adverse employment inaction in order to take action. However, women are traditionally working outside of their office, and there's no protection in those situations. And when you're outside of your traditional office with your employer, the laws for sexual harassment start to fade. The truth is, the majority of the harassment that we experience on a daily basis is at the hands of our colleagues and other professionals, and there is no recourse for those actions. When sexual harassment protections are tied to an ethical code, like they are in this amendment, it's a significant step toward protecting individuals facing sexual harassment outside of their workforce, but within their profession, and allowing them to move forward appropriately. This House amendment is a substantial step in the right direction to address the realities of the modern workplace, and hopefully will serve as a model for a uniform code of conduct in both the public and private sectors. It is time that we combat this issue head on, and this amendment is an important first step. The Women's Bar Association of Illinois thanks you for your time and allowing us to speak in support of this amendment and allowing our voice to be heard on this very important issue.
Dina. Bridget. I should know how to pronounce your last name, but I'm worried I'm going to screw that up too.
Thank you. And thank you for your time today. My name is Bridget Degnan, and I, like Dina Ninfo, we co-chair the Women's Bar Association of Illinois Legislative Committee. And I also am here speaking on behalf of House Amendment 2 for the Women's Bar of Illinois because it's a step in the right direction. There are federal and state laws that currently serve to protect women from sexual harassment in the workplace. For most women, however, should she fall victim, it is unclear to whom she should report and what, if any, disciplinary action will follow. And with the fear of retaliation looming, it is no surprise that 71% of women who are sexually harassed in the workplace just don't report it. The advancement of technology has virtually erased the borders of the traditional workplace, and consequently the law has not kept up, as these laws were designed to protect women from supervisors, from co-employees within the confines of the traditional workplace. I echo Dina's comments about the woman who doesn't work in the traditional workplace. What about the woman who attends organizational events, fundraisers, business lunches and dinners as part of her job? What about the woman who is in court all day, or the woman who attends depositions all day? She is likely working in a masculine-dominated field. She is rarely in the office. She often deals with professionals who are not her supervisors. They're not her co-employees. They are her colleagues, from which there are no protections. There is no uniform code of conduct among professionals, as our culture has not yet permitted it, and federal and state protections in this context are blurry at best. House Amendment 2 recognizes the modern workplace as it relates to the interchange between state employees and lobbyists, and it is our hope that it can serve as a model for clarification of current company policy in the private sector, as well as a uniform code of conduct. Currently, we have American Bar Association Professional Rule 8.4G that addresses sexual harassment. However, Illinois has not adopted that particular section to our code. And it is our hope that House Amendment 2 and the efforts put behind it will be a driver for Illinois to adopt 8.4G within its code of professional conduct, so that women, whether they work in the private sector or the public sector, can feel comfortable in an environment free from sexual harassment. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time on this and for hearing our comments today.
Thank you, Bridget. Next, we have Denise Rothamer.
First, I want to thank Speaker Madigan for this bill and allowing the opportunity to have this hearing today. A year ago, I did file a complaint, and there was no real response.
Ms. Rothamer, can you just say your name and
Yes,
the organization you're with for the record?
I'm Denise Rothheimer. I authored Jasmine's Law, which is named after my daughter Jasmine, who was raped at the age of 11. We made alcohol an aggravating factor in the state of Illinois, doubling sentences on all 5 class felony sex offenses for minors. And I also authored the Crime Victim Rights Sign-Off Sheet, so crime victims are now given information about their rights and compensation within 48 hours of reporting the crime. I've done this work for 14 years out of pocket at my expense because of the experience my daughter and I went through in the criminal legal system, where we were further victimized. And I also, because I've been public and started a grassroots organization, Mothers on a Mission to Stop Violence, numerous crime victims reach out to me because really I'm the only person who can help them enforce their rights in the state of Illinois. That's why I was pursuing a third bill to provide legal representation to crime victims to enforce their rights by using existing funds, so it would not cost crime victims any money for attorneys, and it would not cost taxpayers additional money. That's where Senator Silverstein came in as the sponsor of the bill. Initially, I was working with Senator Althoff, and it was in response to a bill that was passed in 2015 that I opposed, and that's when Silverstein saw me. He called me immediately after I gave opposing testimony, told me how commendable I am for the work I've done, wanted to know how he can help me, and I told him to get in touch with Althoff because she's going to be filing a bill and he could be a co-sponsor. Before I knew it, he became the sponsor. Long story short, April, so that was May of 2015 when I opposed that bill and got my first call from him. April of 2016, I went into a crisis. Mind you, my daughter was raped at 11. I've worked over 10 years to pass 2 laws. They both passed unanimously. And I deal with calls constantly from crime victims whose children have been raped or murdered, who I assist and effectively enforce their rights. So I deal with a lot. What I dealt with, Silverstein, I ended up 6 weeks in a crisis. I lost 20 pounds. My hair fell out. I was so scared. that I would have to admit myself into a hospital because I went down to like 109 pounds. I had like no control in the situation. He had so much power over me, and the mind games he played, the tactics he played, and he knew this is my heart, what he was able to do and invade my privacy, my space, the offenses that I received, how anybody, and I thank you, Speaker, for including training, because it dumbfounds me to think that any person thinks a woman wants to be told she's intoxicating, especially if you're a married man, intimidating. You look like a movie star. I like having meetings with you because you're pretty to look at. All of these things, I mean, just it's so unfortunate that we are used for whatever is going on. But I filed my complaint, and I got a response from the Executive Office of the Inspector General, and they said that I should go to Senate President Cullerton. And then they told me about whistleblower protection and all of that. I was not getting a response from Cullerton's office. I have 400 pages of Facebook messages from the time Silverstein started this invasion of my space. And I submitted it as evidence. He would Facebook me at midnight, call me at midnight. I mean, you have no idea the torment. I went to my state's attorney in April when I had that crisis, asking him to take my place on the bill because I couldn't take it anymore. And then I was told I'm the best person to do the bill, and he would support me, and he would talk to Silverstein if I wanted. But I was afraid of retaliation because in April, Silverstein had killed my bill. He thought I had a boyfriend. And then once I explained to him I don't have a boyfriend, my bill came back alive. So I knew the power that he had over my bill. And I had these people calling me with horrible stories. So how was I to walk away, abandon them? I was put in a very tough situation, especially with my work. I know what it feels like to be in a place where you have no one to go to. And I found myself there again. So I'm hoping with this bill and with this training and with this effort, I, like the others, will have an opportunity to have our complaints be taken seriously, afford us with a hearing. I want these Facebook messages to be presented. I want these phone calls and everything, all the communication between Silverstein and me to be exposed because I want him to answer for it and to know that it is wrong, it is unconscionable, and I, for one, do not tolerate it, and that is why I'm here today. So again, I do want to thank you, Speaker, for bringing this to the attention of the House and the Senate so that the people in the state of Illinois who are not employees, who are people like me, can be protected because we've already gone through more than enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rothhammer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for being here today. Like some of the witnesses, I think that this is a good step forward, but I just have some questions about the current process and what changes are going to be made in this bill to whatever the current process is. And it seems like there's two different avenues. There's the General Assembly itself, and then there's what's going on with the lobbyists. And so I'll start with the lobbyists. What changes in the law does House Amendment 2 to House Bill 402 make, just in terms of the procedures, not the training, but the procedures that will happen if someone encompasses or is harassed? What new procedures are being put in place to address that?
Relative to lobbyists?
Yes.
Well, to begin, they'll be subjected to this pursuant to the bill and the statute. And then it would be a matter that the complainant could go to the Secretary of State's Inspector General, Mr. Burns, who's with us today.
Okay.
And he might be in a position today to explain how he envisions this working in his office.
Okay. And so then the Inspector General would have the authority to investigate that complaint and do what? If it's a founded complaint, what would happen?
I'm going to ask Heather to answer the question.
Thank you, Representative Drury. So under the current state officials and employees Ethics Act, every Inspector General has the authority to investigate violations of the Ethics Act. Any violation of the Ethics Act that the Inspector General believes is founded may then be presented to the applicable Ethics Commission for adjudication. The Ethics Commission then traditionally holds a hearing, makes a determination as to whether or not the claim is founded. If the claim is founded, they have the ability under Section 50-5 of the Ethics Act to impose a variety of penalties. For this specific type of allegation related to sexual harassment and a violation of the prohibition on sexual harassment, the violation would be a fine of up to $5,000 per incident.
And that's a violation for the new training, or that's a violation of under current law?
So there's two different things. Let me explain. So under the bill, we are making a prohibition on sexual harassment part of the Ethics Act, an explicit part of the Ethics Act, which gives each ethics officer specific jurisdiction to handle these types of issues. Because it is now a violation under the Ethics Act to sexually harass someone, the Inspector General would then have the authority to take it to the Executive Ethics Commission. Under current law, inspectors general already have this authority. However, because it's not a specific violation of the Ethics Act, there's no ability for the Executive Ethics Commission to hear violations or impose fines. All the Inspector General can do is prepare a report and advise either the constitutional officer that Inspector General is assigned to investigate, or make the report available to the Executive Ethics Commission or the Legislative Ethics Commission for publication. So there is no ability to fine. What this bill does is make sure that there is an adjudication process and an ability to penalize someone for this type of behavior.
And that applies to the General Assembly as well as lobbyists and anybody else who's under the authority of an Inspector General?
Correct.
Okay. Currently, in the House and Senate, because I'm learning these processes, it was my understanding that people were going to the ethics officer, not the Inspector General. And can you just explain how that process works or worked?
Sure. So I was the ethics officer for approximately the past 7 years, and have been working on ethics issues for about 12 years for the House Democratic Caucus. Since the passage of the State Officials and Employees Ethics Act in 2004, ethics officers have been available for employees, members, constitutional officers, anyone essentially who has a question about the interpretation of the Ethics Act. One of the provisions in the Ethics Act is that every member has to establish personnel policies. Part of those personnel policies is generally some type of prohibition on sexual harassment. I think I'm preempting the speaker a little bit, but the speaker could explain. Every member of the House Democratic Caucus, and I believe the House Republican Caucus as well, has a specific prohibition on sexual harassment in their personnel policies. Because they have that prohibition, each ethics officer has the ability to help members, staff, or others who interact with members and staff on interpreting those policies and whether or not there's a violation. I can tell you over the past decade or so, when people have complaints or concerns about sexual harassment, under current law, they have the ability to go to their ethics officer. All 4 legislative ethics officers are fully aware of this and work with individuals who have complaints. They have the ability to go to an Inspector General. They have the ability to report it to their own employer if they have an employer. So there are avenues, but it's become clear that some of those avenues haven't been clearly defined publicly so that people know where they can go.
I read in the news recently and was aware, we don't have an Inspector General in the House. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have not had one since 2015.
Okay. And so is there a commitment on the part of you, Mr. Speaker, to immediately, in connection with this bill, to appoint an Inspector General?
I don't make the appointment. The appointment is made by a vote of the House and the Senate. It's regrettable that we have not had an Inspector General, but I think it's important to know that the Legislative Ethics Commission continues to function. Senator Link is the current chairman, and the commission has an executive director. His name is Randy Erford. So that over the last period of time, Mr. Erford has continued to provide for the commission to function. And as an example, in 2017, there were 3 complaints that Mr. Erford took directly to Senator Link. In the prior year, there were 8 complaints. In the year before that, there were 15 complaints. Mr. Erford would state that periodically he gets calls he will send a form to the person making the telephone call, and more than half the time the person doesn't take any further action. So the commission has been functioning. Any complaint is brought to the attention of the chairman. Currently, that's Senator Leake. And the commission has the ability to appoint a temporary inspector general if the commission deems it appropriate. And I would point out that the commission is the ultimate decision-making authority in this process, not the inspector general.
And do we know, since 2015, has the commission appointed for a sexual harassment claim, if one has come in, any temporary inspector general to investigate the claim?
I believe the answer is no.
Okay. And then, and so who, strike that. You made some comments about there being a task force that Leader Curry is going to set up, and the purpose of that task force, it seems, is pretty broad to investigate all sorts of issues related to harassment. One concern I have, not about the task force itself or Leader Curry running it, is that throughout history, whether in Illinois or across the country, where there have been internal issues that a governing body has, whether it's a police department, whether it's a religious organization, and they do their own internal investigations, it sometimes turns out that we don't get the right results. So would you, Mr. Speaker, be open to appointing an outside person, be it the current Attorney General or someone completely independent of Illinois, to look into these really just today, these really egregious allegations of harassment, so we could define the problem, and it's not just through Facebook posts and Me Too campaigns, but tantamount to what DOJ did, the federal DOJ did under Obama with the police department here in Chicago, and came in and did a real investigation and made real recommendations. Would you be open to that?
I'd be open, but I would make this suggestion. I think that would be the type of idea that I would prefer for the task force under Majority Leader Curry to review and bring a recommendation to all of us. Our thought with the task force is that it'll be a place where we can take a lot of ideas and think them through and decide if it would be a good thing to do.
So my suggestion, because you said you were open to them, like I said, I don't have an issue with the task force itself or this legislation, which I'm going to support, is just sometimes task forces delay implementation of solutions that we all know need to be implemented, and based on just the chilling testimony we just heard, it would seem to me that the sooner we could appoint someone who everybody would agree would be independent, and whoever wants to make that appointment doesn't really concern me, but so that the public can know that we're just not handling this ourselves, that they know that there's somebody who's going to come in and give an honest assessment of the situation, and then an honest assessment of, is House Bill 402 Amendment, House Bill 402 Amendment 2 enough? Or are there more recommendations, and what sort of oversight we may need? So that would be my recommendation and the request that I would make of you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Worley, followed by Representative Chapalavia.
Thank you, Chairman. I have three areas of questions. First off, Mr. Speaker, thank you for bringing this forward. It's something that is long overdue that needs to be addressed, so thank you for that. In your testimony, you mentioned that there's a third amendment coming along dealing with lobbyists. Can you explain that a little bit in greater detail?
Let me ask Heather to speak to it.
Sure. So thank you, Representative. Over the past couple of days, we've had some conversations with various stakeholders, including Inspector General Jim Burns from the Secretary of State's office. He has asked for some changes to make it a little bit clearer as to what his jurisdiction is and to ensure that he has the ability to take these types of complaints before the Executive Ethics Commission. So I would view it more as technical, but the intent is to make sure that we are fulfilling the mission here, and what the Speaker's intent is to ensure that lobbyists are entirely covered by the jurisdiction of the Inspector General for the Secretary of State.
Okay, thank you. And then secondly, Mr. Speaker, you mentioned what your office is going to do, and I'm not clear if that is for your caucus or for the House in its entirety, some of the changes that you were looking at making.
So let me just respond to that question, if you don't mind. Every 2 years, every member of the General Assembly adopts personnel policies. Generally, the ethics officers have a traditionally really good working relationship of working together to make sure that all of the caucuses have similar policies. So what the Speaker is committed to today is a review for how we, the Democratic caucus, internally handle it, but as we do with everything else in the realm of ethics, the goal would be that the 4 ethics officers for the legislature would work together on developing best practices and a process that works for the General Assembly.
Okay. I welcome the collaboration. That's how it should be done, especially with something at this magnitude and sensitivity. Which leads me to the Office of Legislative Inspector General. We heard some testimony today that to me was rather chilling. And if, it was mentioned that the Legislative Inspector General's office continues to function. I would argue that it has not. When someone has their only recourse to go to that office and the first person that sees it isn't a independent, neutral Legislative Inspector General, it's a member of the chamber of somebody that feels they've been wronged by another member of that chamber. That in itself is chilling and an inherent conflict of interest. Are we okay with that process? Because I certainly am not.
If you don't mind, if I could just clarify for the record. So I apologize, the woman who spoke, I don't know what her name was, but I believe she said that complaint was directed to the Office of the Inspector General for the Governor. I don't believe her complaint was directed to the Legislative Inspector General, just for clarity.
Okay.
So I don't think it's necessary, and I could be wrong, she can correct the record, but I believe that's what she had said.
But then okay, maybe it was the wrong office, but then we don't have a Legislative Inspector General for that other Inspector General to refer the claim to. I have in front of me the letter dated April 15, 2014 from then Legislative Inspector General Homer, who states, and I quote, "To be effective, the Legislative Inspector General must be provided with the resources and tools to do the job effectively. The office has been vacant." Mr. Speaker, will you commit today to putting some teeth behind the office of Legislative Inspector General and whatever power and means you have at your disposal to get somebody appointed to that? Sexual harassment and ethics violations are not partisan. There should not be a 4-4 split on that commission. That office should be filled. Will you commit to getting that office filled today?
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Chapalivia.
Thank you, Chairman. What's scary is that the last testimony went silence in here. Silence, and that's the way women feel, not only in the state of Illinois, but also in the military, and I can testify to the sexual harassment that's gone in the National Guard. And I'm so glad to be in charge of the Veterans Affairs Committee and being the chairwoman. But just out of curiosity, if anybody has ever felt sexually harassed, can you just raise your hand with me in the room? Men too, okay? Outside. Now, I hope you guys got a good view of that, because that's indicative to every situation in any political world. And I want to thank the Speaker and Leader Curry for bringing this forward. There's a couple questions I have for the last witness. If you can come up, ma'am, if it's okay, if you can indulge us. Rothheimer. I think that was her last name.
Denise Rothheimer.
First, I want to apologize how silent it got, and that we didn't really ask any questions. So I want you to stay here for a second. And not only in the political world in Illinois, it's indicative of the United States. Even the highest leadership has sexually harassed women. And we have turned a negative eye for some reason, and a negative cheek and everything else. I think we really need to stand up as men and women and take this on, because this is not a role to be in where we are, that people place us in elected positions to take this very lightly. So I want to thank Representative Worley, too, for his responses. But I'd like to see if we could take a deeper, Speaker, if we could take it deeper to the National Guard as well. And I don't know where our realm is in our control and reach, but I know it is happening. Because it's happened to me when I was in the National Guard, it's happened to me when I was in the Reserve, happened to me when I was in the United States Army. Especially during basic training, when women are the most vulnerable, especially to drill sergeants. And there's men that cover those platoons and companies. So I apologize. Could you, for the record, repeat again once your name, and then which department did you go to with your complaints, so we can get clarity on that?
My name is Denise Rothheimer. I authored Senate Bill 2151, which was sponsored by Silverstein, in November during veto session last year. I went to Springfield to personally demand the bill be called in committee for a vote, to bring it to a vote, because we had a couple hearings. And when he refused to call the bill, I went to Cullerton's office and confirmed with him if he's the one who is responsible for getting the bill called. Cullerton's office told me it was the sponsor who's responsible. Silverstein kept saying it was Cullerton, so I was going back and forth. After the bill was finally, because then I called Pamela Altoff into the meeting with us.
So I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off there, but I'm trying to see the process and where it failed you.
Well, this is the process. So after Silverstein, Altoff and I had a meeting in Silverstein's office, the bill was not going to be called. I went back to Cullerton's office, explained what I had been put through, because it was then I knew, confirmation. This was just a carrot being dangled. And I told them what happened, my experience with Silverstein, how unethical everything was. Then I went, I did make a complaint there. Then I tried to figure out, okay, who do I go to? What formal agency do I go to? I finally got in touch with the Inspector General's office. That's who I was told to go to. I filed my complaint. They sent me that letter, which I have. I think it was dated January 19, 2016. They told me that based on the nature of my complaint, that they're referring me to the office of Senate President Cullerton. Well, I had gone to Cullerton's office. Cullerton's office had the information. So then I called my state senator, who's Melinda Bush. I said, can you please help me get a follow-up on my complaint? Where is it going? What do I need to do?
Okay.
I want a hearing on this.
Okay.
And nothing happened.
Okay. No further questions right now.
Representative Manley, followed by Representative Batnick.
My questions will be directed to Speaker Madigan or Heather. I'm not sure who wants to field this. And some of this is just to clarify some of the things that have already been said. So each member of the General Assembly has to have, under the Ethics Act, has to have a sexual harassment policy for each office.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I know we've talked about it several times in caucus, and I just wanted to be clear. I don't know if the Speaker or Heather wants to answer this, but just so we can understand this, have people actually reported sexual harassment to the ethics officer while you've been ethics officer?
During that time, I have received allegations and complaints of sexual harassment.
What's your process of handling that?
So I view it as sort of an individual basis. It depends on what the allegation is and who's making it. Oftentimes, a person wants to remain confidential, which requires some additional hurdles. Often, it involves assisting the person in getting some type of counseling if that is necessary. If there is a need for investigation, I can coordinate with the Secretary of State's office. With the Secretary of the State Police Office. I can contact the Inspector General. We obviously, even though we don't have an Inspector General, other Inspectors General's offices have investigatory methods. So there are a variety of things, but it depends on the individual complaint.
So I realize we haven't had a legislative Inspector General since 2015, but someone's been available to answer. We've been able to go to someone, and so then how would you go about, as the ethics officer, of reporting that? Let's say it's founded claims. What do you do then?
Again, I can tell you this, in my entire tenure, I've never had a complainant who permitted me to take their claim public. We have had to individually work behind the scenes to help that individual and to address situations. So I've never had an opportunity during that period where we've had a report that I could make public or disclose based on the requests of the individual.
Do you know if other inspectors general have had complaints, and if in the other offices?
Yeah, I can tell you from my experience, my assumption is that every ethics officer has had at least a complaint at some point, and that every inspector general has had some type of complaint. I have personally spoken with the offices of several inspectors general. They have all said that yes, they have investigated sexual harassment in the past.
Okay, so while the task force is beginning its work, what do you think we need to do to make sure people who have sexual harassment complaints, what should we do in the meantime?
Yeah, again, we have a policy in place. I think that a lot of people didn't know that they had some recourse and that they had places that they could go. So in the meanwhile, what the Speaker is committed to, and with Justin Cox, who is the ethics officer, there will be an education campaign for both staff and members to ensure that people know that they can speak with an ethics officer, they can speak with other members, they can speak with other staff, they can reach out to any of the inspectors general if they have concerns. There are a variety of locations, including the Attorney General's office, the Secretary of State's office, where people can lodge complaints. So we will take it upon ourselves to do, as the Speaker said, and as part of his commitments, to make sure that we update our practices, that we're working collaboratively with all 4 caucuses so that we're not giving different information to each caucus and each staffer and each lobbyist.
Thank you.
Representative Batnick, followed by Representative Stratton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for bringing this bill. I have a few technical questions, but first I want to thank all the people who testified today. I don't want to butcher everybody's name, but Denise and everybody else that testified today. Everybody that provided written testimony, just went on record of appearance only, everybody who signed the letter. I've certainly, I've just lived in a bubble on this issue. And it takes people who have the courage to stand up, and I know these are extremely difficult situations when you're dealing with superiors or people that you depend on your paychecks for. So you're paving the way for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of other women. So I just want to thank you for that. Before I get into the technical part of the bill. I kind of break this up into 3 groups, and anybody can respond to this if I'm reading it wrong. But you essentially have elected officials, then you have people who are employees of the state, either employee of an elected official, employee of the state, and then lobbyists, right? Is that kind of the 3 trunks, we'll call it? And the lobbyists are going to go to the Secretary of State, Inspector General, correct? And then the members and employees of members would go to hopefully the soon-to-be appointed Inspector General of, I don't even know what it's called, the House Inspector General or the Legislative
Inspector General.
Legislative Inspector General. Okay, so my question in terms of the details of the bill, so a $5,000 fine is the max fine for all those?
So that's the current law. Under the Ethics Act, the general penalty is up to a $5,000 fine per incident. And again, I think a review of those penalties is something that the task force will likely engage in.
Well, let's look at those individually. We can't. I know we can't fire an elected official. Can you fire a state employee under this?
The Executive Ethics Commission generally doesn't have the authority to discipline. They do have the ability to recommend that a person not be eligible for state employment. But generally, it would still be up to, if it's an employee of the minority leader, the minority leader. If it's an employee of the speaker, the speaker.
Okay. And then the lobbyists, is there a mechanism in there to ban somebody from lobbying based on violations of this or any other part of the Ethics Act?
There is not, and there's actually a constitutional question as to whether or not you can even impose such a ban.
Okay, freedom of speech.
Right, correct.
Okay. And then let's get to the members. So the only thing that, or the elected officials, the only thing that you can do to an elected official is a $5,000 fine.
Well, obviously, under the Ethics Commission, that is, yes, all that they can do.
How long has that been a $5,000 fine?
I believe that $5,000 fine was increased in 2011 when we updated the act, but I could be mistaken.
Okay. I'm just going to restate what I think Representative Jury and a few others have brought up. The idea, I'm thinking about my caucus right now, the idea of starting the process by going to an ethics officer who's in leadership, who's employed by the leader, who works closely with other leaders and has long-term relationship of decades, and their paycheck and livelihood depends on it. Just like it's hard for certain women to stand up and state their case because of retribution, the ethics officer has that same situation. They're in a trick bag too, and I think it's important that, I know that's not in this bill now, and I kind of lean, I think there's some things we know we need to do that we don't need a task force for, and I think the idea of having an independent person that everybody can go to, that's outside, that's a little bit more of a safe zone for everybody, is an obvious important step. And then the $5,000 fine seems rather trivial for many of the individuals that this would come again. So I'm certainly in supportive of the bill. I thank you for bringing it up, and once again, thank you for everybody who testified.
Representative Stratton.
Thank you to the chair, and thank you, Mr. Speaker, for bringing this bill, and thank you for recognizing very quickly, as this narrative continues to unfold, that there needed to be a change, and this is certainly a very good first step in making that change. And then I also want to personally thank all of the women who testified this morning, and the voices that have been lifted up through this process, some by being here, being present, whether you spoke or not, being present, those who signed witness slips, those who have signed on to the letter, those who are part of Facebook groups who are telling their stories, because we know that stories are powerful, and stories being told are what's contributing to the change that is happening right now. So I just want to also lift up the courage that has been displayed through the stories of very personal stories that I know not only are difficult to tell because they are painful, but stories that are difficult because there are many who are concerned about their jobs and their roles, and what does it mean if I step up to say this is what's happening to me. So I just want to acknowledge that, and that it's been very important work, and for your being here, I just want to acknowledge that. I want to talk just a little, I have a couple of questions. I want to make sure that I understand what the Ethics Commission is, and how that fits into this process. And maybe Heather, I know you said that the issue can go to the complaint can go to the ethics officer, right. But then is there a commission structure?
Yeah, so how it works is every constitutional officer in the General Assembly has an inspector general. Then there are two ethics commissions. There's a legislative ethics commission, and there is an executive ethics commission. The executive ethics commission handles any reports that come from the inspectors general of the constitutional officers. The legislative ethics commission handles any complaints that come from the legislature. The individual commissions have jurisdiction to hear and adjudicate claims of violations of the Ethics Act. So again, only of the Ethics Act. They don't have the ability to hear complaints of other wrongdoing. The inspectors general, however, have the ability to investigate pretty much anything. So in 2011, we expanded the role of inspectors general to ensure that they have the authority to investigate any form of wrongdoing or potentially political corruption. The inspectors general, if there is a complaint related to sexual harassment, under current law, what they can do is investigate. If they believe that it is a founded complaint, they have the ability to submit a report to the Executive Ethics Commission. But right now, the Executive Ethics Commission has no ability to have a hearing on that. Mm-hmm. What they can do, however, is make the report public. They have the authority under current law to make any report public if they choose to do so. With this bill, what the Executive Ethics Commission will have, and the Legislative Ethics Commission, is the ability to hold hearings, adjudicate a claim, and actually fine an individual for a violation. They still retain the ability to make a report public. So I think that's important to understand. The Executive Ethics Commission has the authority to make any report submitted by an Inspector General public.
Okay. And just so I understand the makeup of these commissions, so it sounds like there's a Legislative Ethics Commission.
Correct.
and
And an executive ethics.
An executive.
Correct. Yes.
And are these commissions made up of, are the members legislators?
So for the Legislative Ethics Commission, it is made up of 2 members of each caucus. For the Executive Ethics Commission, it is made up of individuals appointed by each constitutional officer.
Okay. And so I think that, you know, it's been talked a little bit about the need for independence, and I think one of the concerns that may be raised, and again, I want to reiterate that I think this is a great effort and a first step, but I think that one of the concerns when we talk about independence is coming before a commission where you could possibly, and I'm not making any claim or, you know, I have no knowledge of anything, but just wanting to make sure that if you go before a commission that there are people sitting there that you feel comfortable and safe to be able to present your claim and complaint. And so since this is a process that we're, you know, stories are being told, and just wanting to make sure that there's enough sufficient independence that, as one of my colleagues said earlier in this hearing, that it's considered safe. And I think one of the best ways to do that would be to make sure that many of the women, the advocates, and others are able to share their perspective on what's considered safe for them. I mean, I think that really is how we create the kind of system that works best to make sure that those voices are part of that process. I also wanted to ask about training, and I don't know if this has been determined yet, but I wanted to ensure, would the training be in person versus online?
So this is a question that we've gotten. So the bill as drafted right now says in-person training. Okay. I will tell you that both the inspectors general for the Secretary of State and the governor have expressed some concern with an in-person training because of the number of employees and the different locations that they're in. For some offices, you may have 1 or 2 people located in a rural central Illinois or a rural area where they can't necessarily get there easily. So both offices have asked for some ability and flexibility to be able to provide some type of video or phone connections for in-person training. I believe that the commitment that the speaker has made is for our caucus, it will be in-person training.
Okay, I do think in-person training can have a deeper impact than online. And then I guess I'll just close by saying that legislation is certainly one aspect of what needs to be done, and I think this is an important part of it. But I think that the conversation around changing culture must continue. And I think the stories that we've heard have been about a culture that has been created over time, and so to change culture, it will require continued work. I think I hear that commitment to education and to making sure that there's training, but that last piece of accountability and how over time people know that this behavior will not be tolerated, and continuing to see those mechanisms to ensure that is very important. So again, I commend you on this effort and look forward to participating in any way I can to help with that change of culture. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to Leader Feigenholz for a couple of technical questions, Representative Worley for a very brief follow-up, and then we're going to go to a vote. Representative Feigenholz.
Thank you, Mr. Zaleski. I appreciate it. First, I too want to say that this has been an incredible week, a very eye-opening week, beginning with some very brave women who use social media in a way that a woman my age is completely incapable of keeping up with. But what was most remarkable about it was the deluge and the volume and the anger and the graphic descriptions of what was going on right under our noses that many of us were not aware of, or we may have been numbed out because it has just become our culture. And for myself, I know I can apologize for that. And I don't know if I can apologize for everybody, but I know how I felt. I had to look in the mirror and say, how have I been acting when this is going on? And so being able to have this conversation with young women who I've known for a long time and has been breathtaking. And you have my commitment and our commitment, and clearly the commitment of Speaker Madigan, Majority Leader Curry, and our very capable attorneys who I entrust and we entrust, and members on this committee, to use this piece of legislation as a springboard. You see there is great interest in this committee about finding a path where people in Springfield can feel safe, whether it's with an independent external voice, if that is the correct remedy, or finding a no wrong door to an ethics officer where people feel there is not a conflict and that they can tell their stories safely without retribution, without being mocked, without losing their livelihoods. And so I look forward to continuing to work on this with, with members. I also do have a couple of questions that are confusing to me about what I've heard. One of the attorneys from the Women's Bar Association referred to a uniform code of professional conduct, 8.4G. Where is that?
So that deals with the legal profession. So lawyers are subject to a variety of different types of regulation. The American Bar Association annually puts forth recommendations for individual states and codes that they should adopt. Our state has adopted a code related to professionalism for attorneys. That is entirely handled by the Supreme Court. They have jurisdiction when it comes to regulating and imposing requirements on lawyers.
But it's uniform.
The American Bar Association's code is uniform, correct. But every state has not adopted it.
For their attorneys.
Correct.
So is there, in any state, is there a uniform code of conduct for non-attorneys in a non-traditional government body? I know, one of the things that's come to light is how I've talked to a lot of people in the corporate world who have told me that in instances where this is happening, that there's going to be that somebody is immediately walked out the door from their place, and they're discharged immediately. And because of the nature of the General Assembly and the different paths, we don't have the luxury of discharge or suspension, do we?
Not for members, but you do for staff. And I would remind you, with members, you have a variety of requirements in addition to the constitutional requirements. You have the Illinois Governmental Ethics Act, which lays out guidelines for legislators, including the methods that legislators should follow in determining whether or not they have a conflict of interest. You have the State Officials and Employees Ethics Act. For other professions, I would say it's on a profession-by-profession basis. You have some professions that are regulated by IDFPR that have very specific codes of conduct. You have other professions where it's essentially they have internal associations that guide their behavior.
Do you see value in a uniform code of conduct in our space, Heather?
Within the General Assembly? I would frankly say I think that when you take into consideration the current laws related to the government, the Illinois Governmental Ethics Act, the State Officials and Employees Act, and the individual policies that have been adopted by all four caucuses, I would say that we actually do have one, but maybe we haven't done a good enough job of making sure that everybody is aware of that.
Well, I say this back to the conversation we were having about a path. I think that from an external layperson's perspective, my concern, from what I've heard, is that people didn't know where to go. People felt that they had no recourse, and they were intimidated by what would happen to them next. So somebody already also said that one of the witnesses said that there was a piece of paper handed to them by an ethics officer or an inspector general, something to fill out. Can you tell us what is on that piece of paper that needs to be filled out? Do you know?
Every inspector general has a different way of accepting allegations. The legislative inspector general, and I believe the inspector general for the governor as well as the Secretary of State's office, has a general form that they will give people to fill out so that they can collect information to begin an investigation. As for the specific form, I don't have one with me, but I'm happy to share it with the committee.
Why do you think most of them are not filled out?
I couldn't begin to answer that question. Again, I think every allegation that's reported to an inspector general is very specific and very unique.
I hope as we move forward that some of the people who have told us their stories could answer that question for us, because it is they who we should be responding to. The other question I have is, where does the $5,000 fine go?
Well,
it's kind of a...
David, who is here from the Executive Ethics Commission, could correct me, but my understanding is it goes into, there is a general fund and it goes back for use of operation of the commission.
Of the what?
Of the commission, the Executive Ethics Commission.
Okay, good. And how much money is in the budget, FY18 budget, right now, unspent for the Office of Inspector General?
I don't have that answer, but we can get it for the committee. I believe there was 375 appropriated, but I'm not sure. We'll double check.
I heard another number, over $1 million. And I also heard, and I'm glad that you're going to clarify this, that it was swept and it's now in GRF because the...
No. I don't think that's correct, but we'll get a full accounting of the different appropriations that are made for the individual ethics office, or I'm sorry, for the individual inspectors general.
I stand corrected on it being swept. What I meant is that because it was unspent, it went back into the general revenue fund, not swept. But thank you very much. And again, Speaker, Majority Leader Curry, it's always a pleasure to see you doing the right thing, and I'm glad you're at the table. And thank you very much.
Okay, Representative Worley, finish with a brief question.
Thank you, Chairman. I will do my best to be brief. There has been broad recognition that there's an inherent conflict of interest to have any legislative caucus leaders following up on these types of complaints and investigations. I mean, Heather and Derek, it puts you guys in a trick bag, and I'm sorry you find yourselves in that. So actually, my idea is for the task force, Leader Curry. We have the Constitutional Office Inspector Generals, and we have the General Assembly Inspector Generals. We should defer. We should accommodate the complainant as much as we possibly can. Perhaps we can have some, for lack of a better term, cross-access. So if somebody isn't comfortable in going to the General Assembly, the Legislative Inspector General, that they can go to the Governor Inspector General, and they, too, have the same tools at their disposal to investigate sort of cross-department or whomever. And that's out of nothing but the utmost respect for those that are going through what has to be a very trying time. We should accommodate them as best as possible. So if you're an Inspector General, you should be an Inspector General in the broadest sense of the term and be able to handle any type of complaint that comes towards you. That also helps with, in this instance now, where we have a vacancy. Right now we don't have anybody to turn to, so maybe they should be able to turn to a different Inspector General.
Thank you, Representative. You kept your promise. With that, we're going to a vote. Representative Morrison and I had agreed prior to waive the reading of the witness slips, so that's your understanding, Representative Morrison. With that, Representative Stratton moves that the committee adopt House Floor Amendment Number 2, recommends do adopt to Senate Bill 402. Is there leave for the attendance roll call? Yes. On a vote of 12 voting yes, none voting no, none voting present, House Floor Amendment Number 2 recommends to adopt to Senate Bill 402 will be favorably reported to the House floor. Seeing no other business to come before the Personnel and Pensions Committee, the committee shall stand in recess to the call of the chair. Thank you, everybody. Trick or treat.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members.
Hello, I'm Michael Jacoby, Executive Director of the Illinois Association of School Business Officials. Most people never look at a school and think of it being an economic enterprise that spends tens of millions of dollars every year. They look at the school as a place their children attend for education, or perhaps as a place to attend a local sporting event. But handling the business of education is the job of the school business officials. We're the ones that keep track of the millions of dollars that come in and go out. Our members face a myriad of issues that include financing new buildings, paying teachers and staff, tracking our pension costs, and supervising the many businesses that contract with local schools. And that's why I'm so happy to serve on the Illinois Channel Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel connects us with legislators working on educational issues in the state capitol, as well as covering educational issues being discussed at conferences around the state. As we see in the debate over pensions, the many details involved in just that one issue, we need a news organization that's willing to give enough time to cover an important issue in depth. I'm Michael Jacoby, Executive Director of the Illinois Association of School Business Officials. I'm also proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel, it keeps us connected to the issues that matter most.
Next, from Chicago, U.S. Representative Robin Kelly gives a speech at the City Club of Chicago asking, "Is bipartisanship dead in America?" Representative Kelly discusses attempts to improve cooperation with her Republican colleagues and later takes questions on policies she's advocating to support domestic manufacturing and whether Democrats can stop the Republicans' tax reform plan. This runs about 30 minutes.
Thank you so much, and now I want you to give yourselves a round of applause for making it here this morning. Good morning, and thank you all for coming out today, and especially so very early. I'd like to thank the City Club for inviting me to speak and for all the work you do to keep our city engaged and informed. My comments today are less of a speech. Someone told me to come and kick butt, but I'm not going to kick butt today. My comments today are less of a speech and more of a series of questions that I hope I can provide some answers to. But some of these questions are too big for one person to answer. They are questions we need to answer as a nation. These are big questions about who we are, how we treat each other, and what kind of future we want to leave our children and our grandchildren. Will they have a better and brighter future? Will the future of energy and technology be innovated here or in Shanghai? Will our nation continue to lead the world in innovation and human rights? These are tough questions, questions with no simple answer and no simple path forward. So let's start with the big one. Is bipartisanship dead? Recent polling from Pew Research Center shows that we are a deeply divided nation, no surprise to anyone here, perhaps more now than ever before. Over the past 2 decades, the number of Americans who express a consistently liberal or consistently conservative position has more than doubled. And since 1994, individuals who express a highly negative view of members of the other party have also doubled. In just over 2 decades, we've managed to push ourselves further and further apart from one another, and it continues to grow. How can we even talk to each other with so much space dividing us? But we've done more than retreat to our individual entrenched bases. We've begun demonizing each other, and that's the most dangerous element. Right now, 44% of Democrats and 45% of Republicans have a very unfavorable opinion of the other party and its members. By comparison, fewer than 20% in each party held the same view in 1994. And I will tell you, because people never believe this, that in Congress, we get along much better than you would think. And I liken it to 2 teams, like, let's say, I'll leave baseball alone. But, let's say the Warriors in Cleveland, they fought each other for the championship, but as soon as the game was over, they hugged each other. LeBron hugged Kevin Durant and all of that. But the fans are the ones that, you know, keep the dislike and the hate or the whatever going. But the teams really at the end do get together, and we do too in D.C., even though it may not look like that. But we've truly begun to define ourselves by our own personal politics. We've crafted a dangerous us versus them mentality. Tragically, we are no longer Americans who see the world differently. We are no longer Americans committed to the same goal with different means of achieving it. We are Democratic Americans and Republican Americans. We are a country of red and blue. Fox News versus MSNBC, Huffington Post versus Breitbart. We each and every one of us, we must work to change it. How did this even happen? What is driving this division? A division that's getting worse, not better. Research shows a few potential causes are personalized silos created by engine algorithms and social media, news outlets that have become more propaganda than substance, political gerrymandering that allows politicians to pick their constituents instead of the other way around, Russian-funded ads designed to foster racial divide, and a 24-hour news cycle that places more importance on breaking news than the actual policy ramifications on families. All of these are contributing factors, but none of them is as important as a personal decision to see someone who disagrees as other. Information is information. Media is media. It was us, the royal us, who decided to demonize our opposition. That's on us and no one else. More than 300 years later, we as a nation have fallen into a trap that President Washington warned us in 1796 in his farewell address. And I'm going to tell you this little quote, but it's not the Hamilton rap version. And I quote, "Of parties and party ideology," he said, "they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government. Words spoken in 1796 are now playing out in 2017. We know there's a problem. Hundreds, if not thousands, of editorials and columns have examined it. So the question now becomes, have we gone too far? Can we bring ourselves back from the brink? When we look back on our history, we see another time when divisions had grown this wide and the rhetoric this heated. That time, those tensions boiled over into a civil war that pitted brother against brother, American against American, and cost more than 1 million American lives. Well, I'm not convinced that we are careening toward armed conflict. We are already seeing tensions boil over into violence, as evidenced in Charlottesville and the death of Heather Heyer. Add to that swastikas painted on synagogues, chants of blood and soil, and kids using slurs in classrooms. While we are not teetering on the brink, we are getting very, very close. You don't wait until you're over the cliff to step on the brakes. We can see the cliff. We're nearly there. But I think that we can put on the brakes and come back from the edge, but only if we want to. And I think we do, or at least the vast majority of us. As I travel around this country, I see a new age of activism dawning. People who previously ignored politics are getting engaged on both sides. People are registering to vote, volunteering for campaigns, and running for office like never before. More and more, these people give me faith that there is a path back from the cliff, and it's largely being blazed by young people. Not only do I see their passion and vigor for change, I see them working together and working across the aisle to get things done. They see their promise of a better future slipping away, and they are working to reclaim it for themselves and for their children and one day their grandchildren. Frankly, they cannot understand why we can't figure out how to work together, and to be honest, they're right. We've been working with others since kindergarten. Why is it so hard to come together after we're elected? Which brings me to my third question. What does it really take to work together? Do you have to like someone? No, but it helps. Agree with them on everything? No, because there'd be fewer marriages. So you learn to compromise. Cheer for their baseball team? I hope not, since I'm a diehard Yankee fan. Sorry. Or sit next to them at the State of the Union? No, I never do. But it does take one thing pretty basic, and that is respect. We have to at least try and understand where someone is coming from, understand why they think a certain way, and respect their integrity, because most of us are really trying to do the right thing. Once you have a foundation of respect, you can see a path forward. But in today's political climate, where compromise is a swear word, you need a little more. You need a commitment to finding solutions. I call this a solutions-only mindset. Stay focused on solutions that work for Illinois families. Ignore the political noise. Ignore the loudmouths on both sides. and remain committed to doing the things that truly help people. It's not a difficult mindset to put into practice. In August, I hosted my first solutions-only inquiry on health care. The rules were simple. Stay focused on real solutions, no name-calling or finger-pointing, and facts and evidence really do matter. While I was disappointed that not one of my Republican colleagues from the Chicagoland area accepted my invitation, this was the first solutions-only conversation, not the last. They will be invited again. My staff and I are currently working on solutions-only events focused on creating jobs, addressing corruption, and ending gun violence. I firmly believe that if we start with a foundation of respect and remain focused on the solutions, we can work together and get something done. And if we need to sweeten the pot a little to make it work, I found that some Garrett's popcorn can help seal the deal. My Republican colleagues say I have popcorn diplomacy, and I can tell you that I have spent enough money on Garrett's at the airport that I should be able to buy the company. But with some Garrett's, I can get about anyone, Republican or Democrat, to talk to me. Seriously, we need to get back to working together, a tried and true American value. It's fundamental to our history, to who we are as Americans. For example, Illinois' favorite son, President Lincoln and his so-called team of rivals. In explaining his actions, President Lincoln noted he had no right to deprive the country of its strongest minds simply because he occasionally disagreed with them. Now, we disagree more than occasionally, but President Lincoln put country over party in the heat of deep division within his own party and within our nation. Decades later, we saw the same bipartisanship come together to propel our nation into the space age. When Sputnik launched, the U.S. space program was in its infancy, and this posed a massive national security threat to the U.S. and our allies. So Democrats and Republicans came together and in less than a year created NASA. Just one decade later, the first man, an American, walked on the moon. Fast forward to the 1980s, when President Reagan and congressional Democrats did two things completely unthinkable. They tackled not only one, but two of the third rails of American politics, tax reform and Social Security. So yes, it can be done. In fact, bipartisanship is the American tradition. So working together is important. Bipartisanship matters. But does it really create better policy? The answer is a resounding yes. Let's start with something big and international, the Nunn-Lugar program, named for Democratic Senator Sam Nunn and Republican Dick Lugar from next door in Indiana. To date, this program has secured more than 260 tons of nuclear materials that could be used to create bombs and destroy more than 500 intercontinental ballistic missiles. Bipartisanship creates good foreign policy. What about national policies? Recently, I worked with my colleagues, especially Texas Republican Will Hurd, to revolutionize government technology because some agencies were still using floppy disks. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that worked with me before, so you're shocked that I'm involved with IT. Together, we put forward a common-sense bill that everyone agreed to. Would I have wanted some changes? Sure. I think Congressman Hurd wanted some changes also. But we compromised. We worked together and passed a major overhaul of government IT that will save taxpayer money, increase our cyber defense, and prevent flash drives from still being used 50 years from now. So that's a check mark for national policies. What about state policies? When I was in the state legislature, I worked with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to pass the EDGE Act, which gives border communities an advantage to outcompete out-of-state rivals, and a common-sense bill to stop straw purchases of firearms. And believe it or not, that straw purchase bill was supported even by the NRA. What a difference a decade makes. Globally, nationally, and locally, ideas crafted by working across the aisle are frankly better policies than those conceived, developed, and crafted in an ideological silo. But it's one thing to talk about being bipartisan, to encourage people to work together. It's another thing to put money where your mouth is and do the hard work. And here's what I'm doing right now to deliver for Illinois families. Each one is a bipartisan effort. Unfortunately, there isn't much appetite in Washington these days for groundbreaking ideas, but I'm working around the edges to tweak and expand programs to make them work better and reach more people. Let's start with one project that's a win-win for everyone. It's my Feeding America Through Farm Flexibility Act, which has been endorsed by the Illinois Farm Bureau and is co-sponsored by my downstate Republican colleague, Rep. Mike Boss. And it's pretty simple. It tweaks the crop insurance to allow farmers to grow more fruit and vegetables to help feed families living in food deserts. Right now, the crop insurance limits farmers growing fruits and vegetables on just 15% of their land. If they grow more, they start losing crop insurance. My bill increases that threshold to 20% if the additional 5% is donated or sold into a food desert. It's a win-win because families can get healthy food and farmers can grow and sell higher value products, critical when commodity prices are so low. I'm glad to share that this legislation will be part of the Farm Bill coming forward later this year. At least that's what they tell me. Helping farmers feed hungry Americans is only one of my projects. I'm also working to make it easier to put government services in your pocket. My Connected Government Act, which is co-sponsored by Rep. Mark Meadows, the chairman of the Freedom Caucus. I bring him lots of popcorn. I'm going back today to bring him his Garrett's. This bill would ensure that all government websites are mobile-friendly because right now, 40% aren't, including the application for federal student aid and the launch point for bidding on government contracts, which is unbelievable. It's 2017. If businesses, nonprofits, and community associations can design mobile-friendly websites, so can the federal government. Again, this is a common sense idea that a Democrat from the Chicagoland and the chairman of the most conservative Republicans in Congress can both get behind. On a more human front, I'm working across the aisle to give law enforcement the resources to tackle sex trafficking, a partnership with Rep. Adam Kinzinger. He's south of me. And along the I-57 corridor in my district, they have a big problem with sex trafficking, which I didn't even realize myself. They even have a task force that they put together. And with the Republican former teacher from Ohio, Rep. Steve Shabbat, we just passed legislation making sure every girl has an opportunity to go to school. I'm proud to say that the Shabbat-Kelly bill just passed the full House and is now headed to the Senate. But how do we go from tweaking programs and fixes around the edges to new innovative ideas that create jobs, protect lives, and drive real positive change? How do we move from the small things to the big ones? In the wake of the tragedy in Las Vegas, I think we have an opportunity to address one of those big things, something I'm passionate about, gun violence prevention. There is a bipartisan bill to ban bump stocks, something we've all heard a lot more about, a device that turns an assault weapon into a machine gun, something that's been outlawed since the days of Al Capone. We started off on a great foot. We had a bipartisan bill introduced and members were signing on. Unfortunately, I see the wheels of progress grinding to a halt on this. Instead of passing a common sense bill, we see the Speaker blaming President Obama, and we see the NRA reversing its original position and returning to its guns everywhere, rules nowhere agenda. I'm going to keep the faith that we can move this forward, like I worked with Republicans in the General Assembly to move anti-straw purchasing legislation. But something needs to happen. Something needs to change. On gun violence and so many other issues, we keep running into the same roadblocks, the billions in dark money that pour into elections. Right now, too many of my colleagues are more afraid of their donors than the people who actually go to the polls on Election Day. We just saw a congressional race cost $15 to $16 million. Is that really the democracy that we want? Do we want politicians that are bought and sold to the highest bidder? I think we need to return to the days of my role model, Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, who was proudly unbought and unbossed. But how can we, the people, compete against the millions and billions that pour in? We have to stand up. We have to speak out. Earlier this year, a cascade of phone calls stopped the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, not once, not twice, but 3 times. We know that people power works, and my colleagues are starting to listen more and more to the people who actually put them in office instead of just listening to those who funded their campaign. But we still have a long, long way to go, and that goes for both sides of the aisle. It's time to get the money out of politics and put people back in. And we especially need you. We need We needed and still need the voices of trusted individuals like doctors and nurses who spoke out against ending access to affordable health care. We need more of this. We need law enforcement speaking out against Republican efforts to legalize cop-killing bullets in the silencer legislation. We need manufacturers speaking out about the skills gap and need for qualified and properly trained workers. Speaking out matters, but we still can do more. We have to give people something to believe in. We have to be for something instead of just against everything. In 2010, we saw the emergence of a party decided to no. In fact, they weren't the party of no, they were the party of hell no. It's 2017, and I can't tell you when I last saw a Tea Party rally. It's just not enough to be anti. You have to have some substance. And that's what my Democratic colleagues and I are working to do, give real substance, real policy solutions that are simple, direct, and understandable. Policies that will help people get good jobs, help them afford a home, and bring down the cost of their medicine and health care. It's time for Illinois families and families around this country to get a better deal. A deal that invests in Illinois families and American communities. A deal that restores the promise of the American dream. A deal that treats people who work hard with fairness and compassion. It's time to invest in the working mom growing her small business and the kid trying to afford his college education. Let's remind ourselves that we are all in this together. Let's just take one of the provisions in our agenda, quality high-speed internet access for everyone. Right now, 56% of rural Illinoisans don't have quality high-speed internet access. It's 2017. You need the internet to pay your bills, check your kid's report card, and sell your business products online. How can we compete when more than half of our neighbors don't have access just because they live in a rural community? This is a jobs issue of the 21st century. The entire Better Deal agenda is built around creating jobs and training workers for the jobs today and in the future. Right now, Chicagoland has about 15,000 jobs open, advanced manufacturing jobs paying an average of $70,000 a year. In fact, some of my staff said they were going to leave me because I don't pay them that much. When I visit manufacturers, all I hear is they can't find the workers with the right skills. Our Better Deal seeks to change that by helping people get better skills for better jobs with a better wage. We want to expand apprenticeship programs and tax credits for businesses that train workers with new skills. We want to partner our community colleges with companies to develop curriculums that ensure students graduate job ready, and my bill with Senator Duckworth would make that happen. We also need to do something to help make families safe. For too long, Chicagoland has watched gun violence take the lives and futures of our young people. We've watched it tear families apart. A bullet has no name on it, and not one of us is safe until we stop the violence. There is no one simple, easy solution, but we can take some concrete steps like ending the flow of out-of-state guns that's spilling blood on our streets. According to the CPD, nearly 60% of crime guns come from outside of Illinois. A quarter come from our neighbors in Indiana and Wisconsin, yet there's still no federal gun trafficking statute. But we can and must do more. Let's take the common sense steps that are supported by 90% of Americans and 70% of NRA members and pass background checks. In the coming days, I have a meeting with a senior colleague on the other side of the aisle to talk about gun issues. When I reached out, I went over and I explained that I just wanted to understand their point of view regarding background checks, the Charleston loophole, gun trafficking, and straw purchases, because I'm very open-minded, but I just can't understand the rationale, so we'll be meeting on Tuesday. We also know that it's not enough just to pass legislation. We need to address the root of the problem. We need to give our young people hope for the future because nothing stops a bullet like an opportunity. So let's create them. Let's create jobs and mentor programs, create after-school programs, and get kids to pick up books and pencils, not bullets and guns. These aren't groundbreaking ideas. They are common sense things that work and nearly everyone supports. Unfortunately, there's a small but vocal and well-funded minority committed to saying no to everything and anything. Now I could go on about the challenges and solutions, but we We can talk for days about what we should do or could do, but there's really only one question left that matters. Do we really want to change? Are we ready to work together for a better future instead of fighting for the scraps of the present? Can we come together and look beyond the next election, the next redistricting, and actually do something, anything for American families? Can we have the same goals but agree that we have a different means for achieving them? Can we get back to American values, values of a respected opposition and respecting the voice of American people and not just those of campaign donors? Can we really come back from the brink and give families something to believe in? Can we finally be for something and not just against everything? I think we can. If we focus on one key question, can we agree that we want to leave children and our grandchildren a better future? Okay, that's enough questions from me.
The first is from Tom Johnson with the Better Business Bureau, member of the City Club. It's all about the ever-growing threat of cyber crime to U.S. businesses. What can be done? What is happening in Washington? How can we team up with your cyber crime team?
Great question. My chairperson, I'm the ranking, he's a chairperson. He's actually ex-CIA, so he's really into this and has been working on this issue. We're holding a series of hearings. We did have one hearing in Chicago and one in San Antonio where he's from, but we are looking for public-private partnerships. One of the problems for government, and I don't know if Madam President runs into this and other people, that we can't afford to keep up. We can't afford the people, first of all. The federal government, doesn't pay as much as state government or county government, or it seems like even local government. I think we're at the bottom. So it's hard to keep people that have the skill in cybersecurity. So we want to work out some type of public-private partnership where maybe the corporation, whoever, Microsoft or whoever you want to name, will loan us people for a couple of years, and then they go back almost like AmeriCorps or something like that. But our bill, we're trying to modernize the equipment, but again, that costs so much money too. So, we're looking to meet with people. We don't have all the ideas, so come to DC and let's meet and see what ideas that we can put on the table. But we're trying to get more trained employees in the federal government to help us with this issue.
Okay, thank you. This is from Jelani Rucker with Zeckelman Industries. As a member of the Congressional Steel Caucus, I bet we didn't know there was a Steel Caucus. Can you describe what the caucus is doing to push the administration and your colleagues to do more to support domestic manufacturing?
Yes, there is a manufacturing steel caucus. What we're pushing for is fairness. What we're pushing for is that our people, when they ship things out, don't have to pay so much where they're shipping to, and then we make it so easy for other countries to ship to have their products here. And we constantly are meeting with our manufacturers through hearings and different things like that, and just meetings to keep abreast of what the issues are, like dropping of steel, illegal logging, just so many things like that our companies suffer. So we're trying to push, to level the playing field as far as monies that have to be paid. And also, what I would like to see is our manufacturers wind up taking other countries to court. And I would say more times than not, we win, but it's just the money spent, the time spent. So changing the rules a little bit, again, so that it's more fair, because that's the big problem.
Okay, this is from Roosevelt University Board of Trustees member Charlie Gardner. Can Democrats do anything to stop the Trump tax reform? And can Democrats capture either chamber in 2018? Two questions.
If I wasn't an optimist, I could not be in this job. So I'm feeling good about 2018, but we have to work. We can't rest on our laurels or any laurels that we have or anything like that. We're really out there working, going all over the country, but we do feel positive, but we don't want to count any chickens before they hatch. And as far as the tax reform, really the thing that's helping us is that they're not all together with the tax reform. And also, you know, it is an election year for all the House members, and they certainly don't want to go back home saying that taxes are being raised on the middle class and the very wealthy are the ones getting 80% of the break. So just that alone. And they still really don't have a bill. It's just a framework. So I think their disagreeing is helping us. And you know, I said I was trying to be bipartisan today, and I'm bipartisan, period. But and Trump, in a way, is helping us too because of all his comments and things he's saying, and then he's putting so much pressure on them and threatening them. So they're in a bit of chaos, which I hate to say it, but that helps us. So.
Great. Okay, this is from Howard Bloomstein, he says he's lived in the south suburbs since 1968. It seems there's been success in the past few years in promoting the positive aspects of living in a diverse setting.
That's my question.
This is your question?
No.
Oh. What is your opinion in that regard? What more can be done?
Well, anyone that knows me in the south suburbs knows that is something that I have fought and pushed for. And when I was the Community Relations Director for the Village of Matheson, we did, you know, all kind of things around diversity and bringing people together and really maintaining diverse communities. In fact, March 8th, 1995, I'll never forget the date. The Sun-Times had the article about the Village of Matheson, but they didn't put it in a positive way. But I think people being involved in the community, I do think it helps to have community relations directors, government relations people that go out into the community. I think it's helpful to have police community relations people in communities. I think that works really well. Like economic development builds the brick and mortar, but community relations, to me, builds the heart and soul. But, you know, we've done diversity dinners in the south suburbs. We just celebrated 20 years of that, and we had people come from all over the south suburbs and Indiana and actually Chicago also, and just different villages are doing things like that. But really people coming together and getting to know each other instead of having the perceptions of the other, as I talked about in my speech, just having the opportunity to bring people together. And also, you know, we also have to work in the business arena because I feel that one broad brush is put on the south suburbs, you know, what we can afford, what we look like, how educated we are, and that affects what businesses are willing to come out there. I know the property tax has something to do with it too, but those other things have something to do with it also. That one broad brush is painted on us, and we always seem like the last place to be thought about, and I think that's improving because of some of the leadership we have.
Okay, Congresswoman, the Garrett's question. You know, we're all interested in how many people, how many percentage on this, on the other, and so on. I don't know, is Garrett a publicly traded company? I don't know, it may be privately owned.
Family. I met
owned.
the vice president because I said to him he needed to move one to Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
Which they did. They moved one to Virginia, but I still got to buy it.
Okay, so here's the question. Based on your observations, members of your caucus and of the opposition, what do they prefer? Caramel, cheese, plain, or mix?
Actually, it's bipartisan. I have most want cheese and caramel, but Eddie Bernice Johnson, Democrat from Dallas, just likes all cheese. Marsha Fudge, Democrat from Cleveland, all cheese. Kevin Yoder, Kansas City, all cheese. But most people like it. Well, it's not called the Chicago mix anymore. Whatever the mix is. So.
You think Garrett's will replace deep dish pizza and Chicago hot dogs as the thing that we associate with food from Chicago?
No, they still associate deep dish pizza with Chicago and Polish and what else did you say? Oh, the Chicago dog.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Folks, let's give Congresswoman Kelly a big round of applause.
Thank you.
The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members, leaders in business, education, law, medicine, and other fields from across Illinois.
Hi, I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Education has never been more challenging in Illinois than it is right now, with comprehensive education reform recently passed by lawmakers and our state's financing of education remaining under pressure. That's why the Illinois Principals Association acts to represent the needs of students and our members. We keep our principals up to date on changes in the law affecting education policy, and we advocate to keep our schools safe and to maintain a healthy environment conducive to learning. With all the changes happening in every field and with the ongoing financial problems facing Illinois, it's vital we all know about changes affecting our lives. That's why the Illinois Principals Association is proud to be a part of the Illinois Channel's advisory on education. Their coverage, whether that of key lawmakers discussing changes in education, an interview with the Illinois Budget Director on the state's finances, or the one-on-one interviews with those working in education, all help to keep citizens across the state connected to the real issues that impact the education of our children. I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. I'm also proud to say I serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
Hi, I'm Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel here at Giant City State Park in deep southern Illinois. This part of Illinois is much different from what we're used to. It's really part of the Ozark landscapes. We're going to first talk with Park Superintendent Bob Martin, and then we'll see how the beauty of this landscape is captured through the eyes of photographer Ed Martin. We'll be right back.
Welcome as the Illinois Channel travels about Illinois. Join us as we uncover our natural treasures, the abundance of recreational opportunities, our world-class museums, and discovering our state's historical legacies. Join us as we travel and learn about Illinois.
Giant City is a state park. We have 4,055 acres in the park. We have a variety of activities in the park, from camping to hunting to fishing, matter of fact. Giant City also was mainly developed back in the 30s by the CCC. We have a historic lodge with a restaurant here also with 34 cabins. One cabin has 2 double beds in it. Another cabin has like a queen-size bed with a pull-out bed there, a little living room. The third type of cabin has a fireplace with 2 double queen-size beds in the bedroom with a wet bar also. There's a swimming pool up at the lodge that they can, go up and swim during the summer if they like, or if they just want to go in, in the lobby of the lodge. There's a lot of exhibits in there. Also the restaurant. We have a lot of folks from Kentucky come up. We have a lot of folks from Missouri come over, like to camp. Matter of fact, both of them. We get Indiana. We get a lot of folks from Wisconsin, Minnesota, just all over the United States, basically. And every now and then we'll get some international folks, too.
But the major attraction at Giant City is the landscape and the rock formations that give the park its own identity.
They're huge rock formations. I don't know, they average anywhere from probably 60 to 70 feet high. And it's like a corridor you walk down, where you walk down it, then you turn right, then you turn back to the left. And it's a real unique, rock formation here for the park, and it's probably, our most used trail here in the park that we have.
The uniqueness of Giant City State Park, along with the natural beauty of the Shawnee National Forest, is what attracts photographer Ed Martin to try to capture its essence.
Well, my interest in photography is well, threefold, I guess. One, of course, I'm trying to document the landscape, but I'm more interested in taking like portraits of places so that they take on a character maybe that is the embodiment, or if you would, the soul of the place. The lighting here is very unique because it reflects off of some of the rocks, and the moss, and the texture is just unbelievable. I don't think that most people in metropolitan areas even understand that these places exist, that some of the more beautiful geography in North America exists in these human-scale landscapes that are the Shawnee National Forest and in the Missouri and Arkansas Ozarks. It's just remarkable. Most people don't realize that the Ozarks extend into southern Illinois and across the state down here. There's so many surprises when you investigate, like Bell Smith Spring is just phenomenal, and the so-called Garden of the Gods area with those pinnacles that overlook the landscape and the bluff below. It's just unbelievable. There's so much to behold in Illinois that isn't normally what you would think of sometimes. What we see here today is something much more rugged and definitive. It's very prehistoric. You know, it makes you think you're in another time and from another time. And to be able to capture that and give it some character and some soul and some feeling is something that I strive to do. It's something that needs to be done, I think, because we lose so much of that in our life today. You know, a lot of times when I'm out shooting, it's a tremendous time to meditate, and to meditate upon nature and on the essence of what it is. And there's a certain spirituality to be had in being alone in such a vastness, and to comprehend or begin to comprehend the environment as it is a living entity. That all goes into being a landscape photographer. And so many times you come across an environment that brings about a certain emotion or feeling, and be able to capture that or try to capture that to show other people is what's so special, to be able to take something and hold it in a moment. Because like here, it is so prehistoric, and while it's been here maybe billions of years, to just capture that one moment and then share that with those people who have never experienced that is a real gift, I think.